Hi there, everyone, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's December 9th. Today we celebrate the first snow of 1855 on Walden Pond. And we'll also learn about the young woman who became an emblem for a raisin company. We'll remember the gardener spy who discovered photography in the last decades of his life. We'll hear a verse of flowers for a poet's dead friend. And we grow that garden library with a book that takes us through 100 gardens to help us understand the history of landscape design. And then we'll wrap things up with the sweet story of a sweet potato party and the fascinating woman who came up with the idea back in 1969. But first, I just want to give you a little reminder to head on over to thedailygardener.org. That's the website for the show. And once you're there, you can go ahead and sign up for the free Friday newsletter. It features a personal update from me. You'll get garden-related items for your calendar. All of the books that are featured in the Grow That Garden library segment of the show are featured for the week. They're all right there in a nice little list, so you won't miss anything. I also include gardener gift ideas, garden-inspired recipes, exclusive updates regarding the show, and anything else that comes to mind. Plus, each week, one lucky subscriber wins a book from the Grow That Garden library bookshelf. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. And I just wanted to share a quick gardener greeting from listener Susan Ducey, who wrote yesterday to say, I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoy your content on the podcast and your newsletter. I love the richness of the history on your podcast, and I always treasure your suggestions on gardening. I'm a book lover as well, and so I appreciate your book suggestions too. And FYI, on my front porch, I have a small pot with a couple of forks from Goodwill to use for the unwanted weed. I loved that idea from your previous podcast. All the best. Well, what Susan is referring to there is in my other podcast, my older show called the Still Growing Podcast. It's still available on all of your podcast players, by the way. I suggested using forks for last minute weeding. And you can just keep those stainless steel forks out in your garden year round. They'll withstand the elements. And if you tuck them in some pots around your property, you'll always have some type of tool handy just for that last minute weeding as you're doing a quick walkthrough. So that's what Susan is referring to there. It's a fun little idea and something that I have done for years. And Susan apparently adopted that practice. So there you go. Anyway, Susan, it was great to hear from you. I always appreciate getting feedback from listeners. I'm glad you enjoyed that tip, and I'm glad that you like the newsletter for the show too. Now, if you'd like to participate in the gardener greeting segment for the show, go ahead and email me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. That's jennifer@thedailygardener.org. You can go ahead and just send me feedback, send your garden pictures, stories, birthday wishes, and so forth, and I'll be happy to read them on the air. In today's curated news, there was a piece that came out on the BBC, and it was titled, Why Kenya's Giant Fig Tree Won Over a President. And it's the story of how this ancient tree was saved thanks to a decision by the Kenyan president to change the plans for a road that was going to be constructed and was supposed to result in the destruction of this giant fig tree. But a last-minute change in plans saved the tree. So definitely take a look at that article. You rarely see decisions like that happening in favor of our ancient trees, but it is so, so important. And also, I just want to take a second to encourage you, if you're on Twitter, to go ahead and follow me on Twitter. You can find me at the handle @GardenerPodcast, or you can just look up The Daily Gardener, and I bet my profile will show up there. And if you do that, one of the things you'll notice that I am trying to really get the word out about is encouraging gardeners to plant more trees because the world just plainly needs more trees. And as gardeners, we often think of trees as a specimen planting in our garden. But we need to think about trees differently because all of the research and data that is coming out on trees is telling us that they prefer to grow in communities, in tree communities. And so I think gardeners should be responsible and help lead this charge. And we can do that by planting trees in many communities on our property, whether it's putting together a small orchard or even a mini forest. That'll be something that you'll hear more and more about, I think, as a garden trend in the coming decade. And it's something I intend to do both at the cabin here in Wyoming, as well as back on my home property in Maple Grove. Even though it's a very, very small suburban lot, there's absolutely no reason why I can't plant more trees on the property this spring. And so I fully intend on doing that. And I hope you'll join me in that commitment. In any case, if you would like to check out any of my curated news articles, like this article that was shared about Kenya's giant fig tree, you'll find all of my curated articles and blog posts over on the Facebook group for the show. It's called the Daily Gardener Community. So all you need to do to join is the next time you're on Facebook, just search for the Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. On this day, December 9th, in 1855, it was starting to snow on Walden Pond. The winter landscape appeared before Henry David Thoreau's eyes, and he captured the transformation in his journal. And I thought you'd enjoy hearing about it on the podcast today. Here's what Thoreau wrote. At 8:30, the fine snow begins to fall, increasing very gradually, perfectly straight down, till in 15 minutes the ground is white, the smooth places first, and thus the winter landscape is ushered in. And now it is falling thus all the land over, sifting down through the treetops in woods and on the meadows, in pastures where the dry grass and weeds conceal it at first, and on the river and ponds in which it is dissolved. But in a few minutes, it turns to rain, and so the wintry landscape is postponed for the present. And today is the birthday of the American model Lorraine Collett, who was born on this day, December 9th, in 1892 in Kansas City, Missouri. At the age of 23, Lorraine worked as a Sun-Maid raisin girl and wore a blue bonnet with a white blouse and blue piping. Lorraine and the other Sun-Maid girls handed out raisins, and in a spectacular marketing stunt, Lorraine even hopped aboard a small plane every day of the festival and tossed raisins into the crowds of people. One Sunday morning, after her mom had set her hair into 8 long black curls, Lorraine was out drying her hair in the warmth of her sunny backyard in Fresno. That afternoon, Lorraine had swapped out her blue bonnet for her mother's red one. The combination of her silky black curls and the red bonnet in the sunshine made an arresting sight. Coincidentally, a group of raisin executives and their wives walked by at that very moment, and they asked Lorraine about the red bonnet. Well, after that day, all the Sun-Maids wore red bonnets, and Lorraine agreed to pose for a watercolor painting for the company. Lorraine and her mom had to rent an apartment in San Francisco for an entire month to work with the artist Fanny Scafford. All month long, Lorraine posed every day for 3 hours a day. She held a wooden tray overflowing with grapes while wearing the red bonnet. The portrait ended up as the symbol for the Sun-Made Raisin Company and was included on the cover of every box of raisins. One newspaper article from 1978 had the headline, "Hair a-glinting in the sun made girl an emblem." After many years, the painting ended up in Lorraine's possession, but then later Lorraine returned the watercolor to the company. Today, the portrait hangs in the conference room at the Sun-Made Growers Plant, and the faded red bonnet was donated by the company to the Smithsonian in honor of Sun-Made's 75th anniversary. And today is the birthday of the politician, photographer, award-winning gardener, and spy, Peter Smithers, who was born on this day, December 9th, in 1913. Peter learned to love gardening as a little boy. One of his earliest memories came when he was just 4 years old, and he planted mustard seeds with his nanny. He said, "She was quite aware of a child's inability to wait long for anything. Instead of having me plant a bulb, which would have taken weeks to appear above ground, she handed me mustard seeds that popped up the next day. I was hooked for life." Incredibly, in real life, Peter inspired the fictional character of James Bond. And Peter's 2006 obituary alluded to his past as a spy and politician when it stated that flowers were important to him. Peter said, "I regard gardening and planting as the other half of life, a counterpoint to the rough and tumble of politics." Once he turned 50, as his days in politics came to an end, Peter devoted himself to gardening. Rhododendrons, magnolias, tree peonies, lilies, and wisteria were his favorite flowers. And in keeping with Ruth Stout's approach, Peter strived to develop a garden that didn't require a ton of work. He wrote, "The garden is planted to reduce labor to an absolute minimum as the owner grows older." And his travels to gardens worldwide inspired the Royal Horticulture Society to ask Peter to write a gardening memoir. The book was part autobiography and part garden book. And it was Peter Smithers who said, "I consider every plant hardy until I have killed it myself." In 1986, regarding his late-blooming career as a floral photographer, Peter said, "I still don't think of myself as a photographer. I'm a gardener with a camera. I have always said that gardeners are by far the most dangerous animals to be found in a garden because we all tend to over-garden. When I have a camera in my hands, I am less likely to make trouble." In Unearthed Words, today is the birthday of the English poet and intellectual John Milton, who was born on this day, December 9th, in 1608. Born in Cheapside in London, Milton is best known for his books Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. John's poem Lycidas is a pastoral elegy. John dedicated the work to the memory of his friend, Edward King, who drowned when his ship sank off the coast of Wales in August of 1637. In Lycidas, John mentions the different flowers that he imagined thrown at Edward King's hearse. The tufted crow-toe is likely a reference to the English bluebell. Jessamine is jasmine. The white pink is a reference to dianthus, and the woodbine is usually a reference to honeysuckle, but it could also be a reference to a generic vining blossom, and amaranthus is perhaps a reference to love lies bleeding. Now, see if you can catch all 11 of the flowers mentioned in John's poem, Lycidas. Bring the wreath primrose that forsaken dies, the tufted crow-toe and pale jessamine, the white pink and the pansy freaked with jet, the glowing violet, the musk rose and the well-attired woodbine with cowslips wan that hang the pensive head, and every flower that sad embroidery wears. Bid amaranthus all his beauty shed, and daffodillies fill their cups with tears, to strew the laureate hearse where Lycid lies. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The History of Landscape Design in 100 Gardens by Linda A. Chisholm. This book came out in 2018, and I must say that the cover of this book is both memorable and gorgeous. I never have a problem finding it. In this book, Linda explores how society, politics, and money influenced the creation of 100 gardens in history. Naturally, Linda's book is organized chronologically and by theme, starting with the medieval garden Alhambra and ending with the modern naturalism of the Lurie Garden. Like the beautiful cover, this book is lavishly illustrated, and Linda is a master at making garden history both fascinating and memorable. An evocative storyteller and a lover of detail, Linda's book is beautifully written. Linda's insights into history and garden design help everyday gardeners appreciate the evolution of gardens over time. If you've ever studied landscape design on your own or in a classroom and left feeling uninspired or bored, Linda's book will provide the guidance and insight you've been waiting for all along. Every gardener and garden designer should have this book because, as Linda advises, we should draw freely from the past. This book is a hefty 536 pages of must-have reference materials for gardeners, garden designers, history lovers, and even travelers with a desire to see and understand gardens and garden history in an enlightened and informed way. You can get a copy of The History of Landscape Design in 100 Gardens by Linda A. Chisholm and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $22. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, December 9th in 1969, that the Daily Times in Salisbury, Maryland, shared a story called Mrs. Zeger Has Some Sweet Ideas for Sweet Potatoes, and it was written by Kelvin Adkins. The article explained, Mrs. Peyton Zeger is one of those persons who always has a project of some sort going. Frequently, the project turns into some excuse to have a house full of friends over. But this particular episode started with a yellow jacket's nest and a banged up knee. Peyton was working on a neighborhood beautification project, a flower garden nearly as long as the street, and she disturbed some yellow jackets. Bugging out in a hurry, 2 yellow jackets hit her with such a stinging force that she fell and bruised her knee. While off her feet for a few days, she thought of hosting a sweet potato party and started putting the recipes and details together. Now, when I was researching Peyton, I discovered that she was an avid gardener and she had planted what she called a ditch bank at her home, and she called it Peyton Place. The ditch bank was planted with shrubs and flowers to provide interest and color throughout the year. She was ahead of her time. And concerning the sweet potatoes in this story, Peyton had two chief concerns. She said, number one, it really hurt me when I read in the paper about the local farmers having to plow up their sweet potatoes because of the low market. And number two, many housewives think there are only three ways to prepare sweet potatoes: candied yams, potato bread, and potato pies. So, as the article says, Peyton decided to yam it up with a sweet potato tasting party. Peyton called the party Peyton Presents Some Sweet Ideas, and she invited some 50 home economists, housewives, and Twin Tree Road neighbors to judge the recipes. And there were a few newspaper and radio people there as well. Peyton prepared some 25 recipes and started the party off with her own creation, a sweet potato punch. Now, for this libation, Peyton was inspired by a recipe from the Ecuadorian embassy. I kid you not. Well, the overwhelming favorite from her party was Peyton's sweet potato cheesecake, which captured the attention of a local bakery. Peyton pointed out that every time her sweet potato cheesecake is made, a farmer has a market for 3/4 cup of potatoes. Peyton was doing her part. And at her party, Peyton made sweet potato pineapple pie, sweet potato pudding, pineapple sweet potato balls, sweet potato pecan pie, triple apple sweet potato cake, and sweet potato candy, just to name a few. And as a party favor, Peyton sent every guest home with a printed recipe book featuring her sweet potato creations. And by the way, if you're interested, you can head on over to thedailygardener.org and look in today's show notes, because there you will find the recipe for Peyton Zeger's sweet potato cheesecake, complete with her sour cream topping. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.